we recommend you take this moment to do what we're about to do, which is enjoy an Alp.
Targeting in California farmers and people in the hotel and leisure business?
Well, we're not targeting. In fact, if you look today, I put out a statement today about farmers. Our farmers are being hurt badly by, they have very good workers. They've worked for them for 20 years. They're not citizens, but they've turned out to be, great. And we're going to have to do something about that. We can't take farmers and take all their people and send them back because they don't have maybe what they're supposed to have, maybe not. And you know what's going to happen and what is happening? They get rid of some of the people because, you go into a farm and you look and people they've been there for 20, 25 years and they've worked great and the owner of the farm loves them and everything else. And then you're supposed to throw them out. And you know what happens? They end up hiring the people, the criminals that have come in, the murderers from prisons and everything else. So we're going to have an order on that pretty soon, I think. We can't do that to our farmers. And leisure, too, hotels. We're going to have to use a lot of common sense.
ساعت الان 3:37 ورودی فرحزاده پایین به ساختمون مسکونی زدیم.
Welcome to the SCIF and welcome to the after action report after the Israeli strike on Iran last night. We should have had some audio on that video. Sorry about that. But you saw all the different strikes across Iran, and we're going to dig into all this, how all this happened, and what the target set is, what the future looks like, and what to expect here in America. I want to say welcome to the crew. You're cleared hot in the chat. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for all the engagement. Love all our regulars and more coming all the time from around the world. Thank you for that. Really, the comments have been fantastic on the show. I had a comment last night saying, I looked all over and you're the only news service who was providing regular updates that I needed. Thank you so much for that. And the guy who was behind all that is with me right now, Brent Beecham. Welcome, sir. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
So Brent is my classmate for the U.S. Air Force Academy, and also a former F-15 pilot and A-4 pilot for the only guy I know that flew for the Israeli Air Force and the U.S. Air Force and for the Delta Airlines Air Force, but and now as a real estate developer. But I wanted to get your take on what's going on here, because you've seen this from so many angles, and that's why I have you on all the time, because your insight is fantastic. Give us the overview of what you think happened last night that people may not be, or that people need to understand.
Yeah, so I think this was a multifaceted attack. I think most people focused in on the part that was the Israeli Air Force making attacks, and in truth, the Mossad was key to all of this. They did something similar to what the Ukrainians did to the Russians.
Yeah.
Which was they stored a bunch of UAVs in country, smuggled them in, and the initial attacks were absolutely coordinated with the Israeli Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
So they had targeted all of the air defense sites with these explosive drones, and they were all in place, ready to go. And the minute that the Air Force was ready to attack, they triggered the attacks on the surface-to-air missile sites, and that opened the door wide open for Israeli Air Force to attack all the other strategic targets. And I don't know. I believe that some of the high-value targets they took out, they basically took out the entire leadership of the IRGC.
Mm-hmm.
And the regular army and a number of scientists and whether those were drone only attacks or whether they were Air Force fighter attacks, it's not totally clear. You can see some of the buildings that were struck. It appears
you would think, Brent, that the Israeli or Iranian scientists and key figures would stop living in those penthouses, man, because they've been targeted and killed in their bedroom like over and over again. It's amazing.
Yeah, the interesting thing, I think, is the timing. That from stuff that I read, the Iranians kind of expect an attack, but they didn't think it would happen until after the talks were completed with the U.S. today. So they expected this weekend maybe to see something. The fact that they anticipated meeting with the U.S. and maybe the coordinated conversations between Israel and Trump that said, well, I'm guessing Trump probably really didn't want them to attack, but if they're going to, then at least give me a chance to try to negotiate this deal first. And when the deal fell through and they were playing hardball with the U.S., they found out the hard way that that Israel was not going to stand by and watch this happen. And I know a lot of people are worried, why the timing, why now? I believe there was intelligence out there, and Pete Hegseth hinted it as well, that they were within days or weeks of being able to complete a nuclear weapon. And, in the hands of Iran, it's a threat not just to Israel, but it's a threat to everyone.
So that made me wonder, I thought about the Ukraine strikes, as you mentioned, on Russia. I think there's probably some of the same minds behind some of these, in our government or whatever. I mean, because it took them a long time to plan this stuff, right? In Iran. I mean, that's been going on, they said, for 18 months.
I would think at least that long. And of course, they've recruited these guys. And and I think and I saw your interview with the Iranian opposition leader, and I think he's probably not, the only one in Iran that's hoping that the Ayatollahs will be gone soon. And I imagine that the Mossad didn't have a whole lot of effort to recruit a significant army within Iran. And
that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. And also the drones are here, right? If we're smart, I mean, this is twice this has been used, so other people can think like this as well. The containers, the warehouse, the van parked in the guy's yard that he's never home, that kind of stuff. Farmland next to U.S. air bases with Chinese ownership.
And it may not be just national actors. It could be, we've seen a lot of these rioters all across America. How long before they decide that they're going to do the same thing? And it doesn't have to be at this scale.
Yeah, totally.
Everything's vulnerable at this point. I mean,
so
everything you thought is safe, surface to air missiles and jamming and whatever. I think the world woke up to a different world this morning.
Totally agree with that. What was the U.S. involvement? There's some reports there was air refueling. Do you know anything about this? I haven't confirmed that. Have you heard anything from your sources?
The only air refueling I saw was Israeli tankers that I've seen video of, and it's really interesting because my wife was sitting on the couch. We were watching just regular old news, and she was texting with her niece who lives in Israel, and it was like 2 a.m. This is an hour before the attack started. And she said, I woke up in the middle of the night because there's a racket over top of my head that's just ongoing. And so there was an
jets
hour
taken off.
That's jets taken off, and she lives not far from Ramat David, which is a big F-16 base. So that was all marshaling to go for the attack, and that's when I texted you. I said, hey, at 8 o'clock the sirens went off all across Israel, and that was okay. They're already, the bombs are just starting to drop, and it's really, really interesting. I mean, this whole thing was so coordinated, and everybody talked about the beeper attack and the Iranian or the Ukrainian attack on the Russians. This was just a whole nother level beyond that, because they've taken out, I believe, everything that was a ballistic missile that could have been launched is gone. Their surface to air missiles, battery sites are gone. They have zero defense. I saw some reports about some shoot downs of Iranian fighters that did come up to oppose them. At this point, I think Israel can just sit over top of Iran and drop bombs on their nuclear sites. And day two, I'm guessing that's probably the big focus now is to go after the next sites. They took out the Nance reactor site, and now they got to go after the other couple of sites, Fordow and Isfahan.
Well, tell our audience who may not be familiar with air power tactics what air superiority and air supremacy are, because that's you're right. I think that's what Israel is going for.
Right. So air superiority would be in any given moment, in any given space, we're able to control the air, and that's important to have, because you want to have your fighters be able to drop bombs without being harassed by either surface to air or air to air threats. When you have air supremacy, which I believe that's probably what they have now. Literally no one on the ground is safe from attacks from the air, and fighters can fly over virtually unopposed at will as they feel like it. And I don't think Iran has any possibility. I mean, they may have one missile here and one fighter there, but they don't have any. From the sounds of it, they don't have anything left. Their one response was shoot 100 drones. Not one single ballistic missile has been fired, and 100 drones were all shot down, interestingly, by Saudi Arabia, Jordan, France, Britain, and the U.S.
Yeah.
So
this coordinated defense, definitely.
yeah.
And
one other thing is the Home Front Command told everyone, stay at home, stay in your shelter. This is going to be a long fight. And they released people from their homes today from staying. I mean, obviously you want to stay close by a shelter, but they're not saying you have to stay at home right now.
Yeah. Which means the threat is not as severe as they thought it might be, right? Because of what they took out on the ground. And I just want to highlight for our audience sake, we talk a lot about having reporters on the ground and people in different locations. Perfect example, Brent just mentioned, he was texting me. We were literally up on the air about this, boom, right when it happened. You didn't get that from anywhere else, and our audience definitely recognized that. Brent, I'm going to take a break. Can you stay with us?
Sure.
All right, be right back.
Your government doesn't care about you. That's why you need a medical emergency kit. It contains life-saving medications like ivermectin, Z-Pak, and antibiotics. Stock them before they block them.
True life Alp story. I got a call from a friend of mine yesterday, honestly, true story, who said his girlfriend had just broken up with him over Alp. He wouldn't stop. And I thought to myself, that's kind of sad. And he said, no, it's not sad. Imagine if I'd married her. Now I know I was saved. Then the next day, this same friend is driving at twice the speed limit through a major American city, pulled over by a cop in a speed trap. Cop takes his license registration, goes back to the patrol car, runs him, comes back, looks in the window, and sees a tin of Alp on the dashboard. Pauses, stunned, says to my friend, you use Alp? Yeah, I do, says my friend. So do I, says the cop. We all do. He looks at my friend thoughtfully and goes, drive safely, sir, and hands back his license and registration. No ticket. So in 2 days, he's saved from a tragic marriage to a girl who doesn't like Alp and a speeding ticket. All true. It's more than a nicotine patch.
So Brent, I was reading about, and we showed a little of the video in the cold open, the Mossad operatives, which were in country long before planting a lot of these drone. I mean, I read they established a drone base essentially inside Iran. And so that's helicopter infill, I would imagine, or even, a paradrop. I don't know. How would they get in that far, do you think?
Well, I believe they're driving in, probably from, maybe Azerbaijan or and Israel has really, really good contacts in surrounding Muslim states that don't particularly like Iran, and they've driven across. In fact, if you remember back a few years ago, the Mossad infiltrated a warehouse that contained all the nuclear secrets and drove a truck out. They drove it out through northern Iran, through Turkey, found its way out from there. And it may have gone into, maybe they flew it out of one of those, northern states.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably, the border is probably not very secure, and they can probably drive trucks in.
Interesting. That's really, what do you think the main targets were? Air defense at the beginning?
Yeah, well, so I think it was, like I said, it was because they had so many different ways to attack. The drones were going after air defense sites and also ballistic missile sites. The Air Force was going after ballistic missile sites, nuclear sites, and then they went after all the leadership. I mean, they talk about decapitation. I read a quick piece that Israel had feigned some sort of attack or did something that got all the leadership of the IRGC Air Force people into the headquarters, did something else to keep them there right before the attack. So they made sure that everybody that was in the leadership of the Iranian Air Force was blown up in one single attack. So really, really smart stuff. I heard some other reports where they must have had guys on the ground and they were able to tell them, hey, he moved from this room to that room, so they could switch the point of attack as they were, shooting missiles at their homes,
at their bedroom in the penthouse.
Yeah.
If you look at the photos, there's like a big tall building, and then the hole, and then the rest of the whole room is blown out. Just amazing.
The intelligence of this just is unreal, but you had to have the participation of Iranian people. I think they're ready to throw off the Ayatollahs, and this is, if they don't take this opportunity, this may be the last opportunity they have to really have a shot at overthrowing these guys. And I believe they also took out Khomeini's closest advisor, so they got really close to him. I don't know if they intentionally didn't get him or they just didn't have intel to get him, but if they're flying overhead for the next 2 weeks unopposed, if they can find him, and if you're an Iranian, I'm guessing they're probably going, yeah, he's in that building right over there.
Yeah, that's a good point, because the people do not like this regime. I mean, we've talked about that in depth, and the murder and the torture and it's been going on for 50 years. They just don't like this group. And you're right. Regime change is probably the goal here, and it's different because Trump, this administration, may be for that, whereas previously that was not the goal. They were trying to keep this regime in power, with Obama with the $1 billion in cash, and letting them have drones, American drones, so they could reverse engineer them and all of this stuff, and the media going after any kind of uprising and tamping it down. That's a fantastic point, actually. What equipment do you think was used on the Israeli side?
Pretty much everything they had in their arsenal. F-35s. I've seen video of F-15s flying overhead, and they were F-15s that appeared to be flying as air cover, not as additional attack capability. F-16s I've seen flying in and out. They use a 707, a converted 707 for their tankers. Some of actually in the videos that you showed, you see some barrage of missiles that are flying in. I think those are probably something like an AGM-132, which is or 135. It's the Popeye missile from Rafael, because it was those were like multiple rockets, missiles that were being fired at one time. So they used just about it. And now, of course, the bunker, they have bunker busting bombs. They don't have what we have in the U.S. Air Force with the B-2s. Are able to drop a much larger bomb. But you don't have to get all the way there on one strike if you have air supremacy.
Right. Well, that's the whole point, right? And you're talking about F-16 use. I mean, you don't fly F-16s in this kind of threat environment unless you've degraded the systems pretty heavily, right? I mean, that's a 1970s technology, so it's not stealthy. It's kind of like the weapon you use if you have nothing to shoot at you.
Right. Yeah. And that's pretty much, I mean, whether we were going to fight it with the Soviets or when we fought in Iraq, air defense systems have to be degraded in order to fly those kind of airplanes around. Otherwise, they start dropping like flies. And
what is the Wild Weasel platform, or is that even needed anymore? Where they would, suppression of enemy air defenses, you see something light up and you attack it, or is that done by standoff weapons now?
I think Israel's using drones in that case to take out those systems, and they've been doing things like that for a long time. The U.S. still uses F-16s and F-18s to do that role, but it's kind of a combined role between those different aircraft. But Israel's using drones for that, and in this case, it looked like they were drones that were inside of Iran pre-positioned.
I want to find out. I'm sure we'll find out more about that in the future, but as a special ops guy, I'm highly interested in that. What do you think? So you think there's not going to be, because there's a lot of press out there about, coming mass casualty in Israel with hospitals on alert and all. You don't think that's going to happen?
I don't think so. If there was an attack, I mean, if you're Iran and you're in the middle of this, and you've just lost half your leadership, and you haven't launched ballistic missiles yet, I'm not sure where those are going to come from. And unlike us, Israel is a much, much smaller country, and you have a population that kind of loves its own country, unlike maybe the U.S. So there's not going to be many opportunities for them. Of course, there are populations within Israel that might be co-opted, but I just don't see. Even Hezbollah came out and said we're not joining in on the attack.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, we're not doing anything. And there were some rockets that were fired at northern Israel in the last couple of hours, and I suspect those were either rogue elements within Hezbollah, or maybe Hezbollah kind of went, okay, we'll shoot a few just to say we're on your side.
Right.
Hamas is going, oh, Israel's getting closer to its own destruction because they're making these strategic errors, first in Gaza, now in Iran, and I'm not seeing it. Yeah. And even the Houthis, who you would think would have some ability to, they've been able to attack Israel pretty regularly. They haven't launched a bunch of missiles. So has Israel and the U.S. destroyed that capability to a degree, or are they just holding off, saying, well, that's Iran's problem, and we'll fire one here and one there to keep our reserve. So I've not seen. You think back 2 years ago, and Israel was surrounded by Hamas with thousands of rockets that could hit Tel Aviv or Ashdod or Ashkelon, Jerusalem, Beersheba. You had Hezbollah with reportedly 150,000 rockets and missiles that could obliterate Israel. You had Syria, that was certainly no friend of Israel, and was the supply base for Iranians to drop stuff into Lebanon. And you had the Iranian regime with nuclear weapons ready to be deployed and thousands of ballistic missiles. How many missiles have hit Israel in the last 2 years? Virtually none.
Yeah,
virtually none.
Yeah.
So and no real casualty.
What I was noticing, kind of the confusion of the Iranian leadership after this decapitation strike, reminded me of the Hezbollah pager thing, where all of a sudden they're just like, the younger guys are in charge and they don't know what to do, and everybody else is dead.
Right. Well, and I think that's probably indicative of a regime like Iran, where they're so concerned about maintaining power that anybody that looks like they just have the slightest hint of disloyalty, they probably execute them.
Yeah.
And I was listening to an Israeli commentator who was of Iranian descent, and he said there is no backup leadership to speak of, because they basically weeded them all out. Stalin did the same thing in the Soviet Union prior to World War II. All his generals that were actually capable of doing anything were in gulags. So
fantastic point. What do you think the next wave? The Israelis are talking about a 2-week operation, and there'll be multiple waves. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this will be opportunities for leadership strikes and to ensure that the nuclear facilities are disabled permanently. And, of course, there's probably going to be guys sitting overhead waiting for any kind of ballistic missile to be rolled out. I saw another report this morning that, they had some underground storage, that they were moving the ballistic missiles to other locations, dispersing them, and they were being bombed as they were being moved. So I think it's a defensive guard with conventional airplanes to ensure that nothing, no ballistic missile gets launched, or, they can limit that kind of attack, and then just spend all this time blowing, the different facilities up.
Wow. I think that's all the questions I had. Do you have anything else you want to say?
No, it's, I mean, what a world we live in.
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, you think that you've seen it all, and things have just absolutely turned upside down again. And I can't wait to hear the squad in their reaction today. I'm sure there's going to be some really good GOP commercials being filmed today by the squad in America, talking about how Israel, attacked the poor Iranians, and how many Iranian flags are going to go up on Facebook Facebook pages today.
Well,
that's what worries me.
Well, yeah, we'll monitor that. But there's also the point that Obama was obviously pro-Iran, and there's a lot of still to this day pro-Iranians in the government, the U.S. government, spies even. I think some of them are still there, which they need to be removed, obviously. But the arrogance they had is gone, I think. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there was an uprising during the Obama era. We could have backed it, and we chose not to. And that how many people have been tortured and killed and terrorized by a regime because we didn't support an attempted revolution. But again, I think if there's ever an opportunity, this is it. And it could be really interesting in the next few days what happens within Iran. I think that's the next thing you got to watch out for is when are the uprisings in the street happen, if they happen.
That's a good point as well. And what does Israel have planned? And obviously there are other intelligence agencies involved here. And I'm writing an article now. This is time for Trump to be the real statesman here.
Yeah,
I mean, to really thread the needle and move the world forward with as little bloodshed as possible. So anyway, Brent, thank you so much, and incredible insight. Appreciate it. Take care. Thanks for the flow of info all night long. Kept me up all night, but that's okay.
I'm sorry.
It's all right, man.
It's part of the business.
It is part of the business. Take care, man.
All right,
Ciao.
thanks.
Bye.
Take care.
Watching my friends gain more and more weight, and then eventually I got to tell you, this is a little dark, but bad diet literally killed my whole crew.
Wow.
Diabetes, a stroke, I mean, all kinds of stuff. It's like, you had a stroke? You're not even 50 years old. You guys got to quit eating this stuff. Your body knows what's what. You're not conscious of this. But that's why people will go to the refrigerator and they'll grab this and that and the other and put together this outrageously elaborate combination of foods. Your body's trying to reach balance. Unbeknownst to us, our bodies are always trying to reach homeostasis. You can't eat all of this stuff and expect to live a long time. And one thing led to another, and I went, forget this. We're going to make our own product. So we partnered with one of the world's top 3 biochemists where nutrition specific study is concerned. I said, all I want is the best nutritional and immune support product in the world. So we mixed it in yogurt. It's a powder. I got a bag of it here. I keep one on the console all the time, just so I can show people.
Yeah.
And it's a powder. Now, this is not candy. This is hardcore nutrition. And sugar is an enemy. And most people do not know that the reason these bellies are showing up on people all over the place, your body makes fat to store the toxins it can't get rid of. So it just puts them over here. But I can tell you this, you take this for 30 days and then lay off of it for 2 or 3 days, and you'll go, good grief, give me some more. Skin, nails, hair growing back. Cut yourself and it heals in half the time.
I'm David Cross, and you may know me from my election integrity work, but I also own U.S. Asset Management, an investment advisory practice. I've been an advisor for nearly 30 years, and one of the questions I get asked most frequently is, do I have enough money relative to other people my age? And while that's an interesting question, it's also the wrong question. The right question is do you have enough money to sustain your lifestyle for the rest of your life? This is a question you should know the answer to. This is what we do. Check us out at us-am.com and look for our big, proud American Eagle logo.
We have put flag slogging over Africa, foot, slogging over Africa, boot, moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war. 7, 6, 11.
Welcome back to the SCIF. Big day, big night. We were all over it, and I love the comments flooding in from literally all over the world about CDM's coverage of the conflict over the last couple of years. Actually, all these wars, we've been way out in front in bringing you really what's going on the ground and really good insight from people on the ground. And that's a perfect example last night of people inside Israel, texting us that it's happening. And so we were early to get out all the information in front of all of Conservative Inc. I'll guarantee you that. In the legacy media as well, which doesn't really want to report on it. I want to give a shout out to What Finger News, our partner, whatfinger.com, our aggregation partner. They post a lot of our content. If you're looking for a great aggregation site to just see what's going on in the world on a daily basis, put them in your scan, as well as cdm.press. Put us in your scan daily, morning, noon, and night. So you find out we're always early. I can tell you that we're always early as to what's happening in the world, and you're going to hear things that you just didn't think were possible on CDM, and then 99.9% of the time they turn out to be exactly correct reporting, and we're proud of that, and that's what we bring. I want to just highlight, Brent was talking about the Iranian resistance. I want to highlight my book, Paying the Price, The Untold Story of the Iranian Resistance. You can get it at historyofbooks.com. I think they still have some signed copies, or you can get it at ltoddwood.com. or anywhere books are sold. Any bookstore can order it if they don't have it in stock. But I just want to read you, there's 5 reviews on Amazon because it's not that old of a book, but they're all 5-star. And, Iran has a long history of violence and oppression from the Shah to the current theocracy. Living Iranians have not known a free country. Wood's exploration into the world of Iranian freedom fighters is an important read for those who wish to understand modern Iranian political dynamics and highlights how many in the West can easily take freedom for granted. So really good reviews on that book. And just if you're looking for somebody who's interested in geopolitics or whatever, great gift for that summer beach read. You'll learn a lot, I guarantee you. And on that note, I ran yesterday a live interview with Ali Safavi from the National Council of Resistance in Iran, the MEK, which is an organization on the ground in Iran who's fought the mullahs literally militarily for 40 years. And I spent a lot of time with them in their camp in Albania after they were removed from the Iraqi border by the U.S. government. But I'm not sure everybody saw this interview yesterday, so I'm going to run that again. It's not that long, but I do want you to understand an option to bring good governance to Iran. So here we go. twc.health/CDM. Let me just bring up that for the video audience and also the audio audience. twc.health/CDM, promo code CDM, take 10% off. This is the travel kit. It's got everything in here you need while you're traveling, antibiotics and a bunch of other stuff. Check out all their products. Spend some time on the website and support our sponsor, the Wellness Company. I'm going to bring in Ali Safavi now from the National Council of Resistance in Iran. Good friend of the show. Ali, thanks for coming on today, sir. Appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning. A very good morning to you. Great to be with you.
So I've known you for a long time, and we've been talking about how to bring down the regime in Iran from the inside so there doesn't have to be a conflict. But the war drums are beating in the Middle East. What do you see happening? And does Iran have a nuclear weapon?
Well, I think those are two questions. First of all, as to whether there will actually be a conflict, certainly I think myself and many others, millions of Iranians, and I think everybody around the globe believes that there shouldn't be any conflict, and that at the end of the day, the Iranian regime must stand down and submit to the will of the overwhelming will of the international community to dismantle its nuclear weapons program, which has no other use whatsoever but to get the bomb, to suspend all enrichment activity, to allow IAEA snap inspections, and of course, to basically send all of its enriched uranium outside Iran and destroy all those centrifuges, which has built at great expense to the Iranian people some $2 trillion, which is more than all the oil revenues that Iran has had since the inception of its rule in 1979. That said, as to whether the Iranian regime now does have a bomb, the jury is still out on that. It remains to be seen. But based upon the revelations that we have made, especially the most recent one back on June 10 in our Washington office, unveiling this new expansive and very elaborate plan called Kabir Plan, which basically far supersedes the Ahmad Plan, which, of course, we revealed initially, and the regime had to disband it after the exposure of the Lavizan Shian site. It causes tremendous concern and urgency. As I'm sure you noted, the IAEA's May 31st comprehensive report basically said that the regime was in violation of its NPT obligations. And so with that, and with the adoption of the resolution this morning by the Board of Governors, 19 votes in favor, I think there should no longer be any hesitation on the part of the EU3 and the United States to refer the Iranian nuclear dossier to the UN Security Council to place it under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. Because as it stands, whether or not they actually have acquired a bomb, the regime poses a present and urgent danger to not only its own people, not only to the people of the region, but also to the international community as a whole. Imagine, God forbid, if we wake up tomorrow and the headline says, well, Iran has the bomb. What would that entail? I think the countries in the region will be in panic, and I think others around the world will also be panicking, because it will be a grave mistake to allow the world's most dangerous state to acquire the world's most dangerous weapon.
Let me ask you, there's been a concerted effort over the years that I've known you in England and in Europe and in the US media to demonize your organization. And there hasn't been a lot of help from the US government. In fact, there's been the opposite of help with the MEK and the NCRI and their efforts to take down the Iranians. Are you getting a different response from the Trump regime?
Well, I think, quite frankly, that after, as you said, the long and very arduous and expensive years of campaign on our part, especially in the legal field, to challenge the politically motivated designation of our movement by the US, the UK, and the European Union, all as part of a goodwill gesture to the Iranian regime, I think there's a recognition now that the NCRI and the MEK are a force to be reckoned with. First and foremost, our movement and Mrs. Rajavi, whom you know, has articulated a very, very visionary 10-point plan, a transition plan for the future of Iran, which, of course, calls for gender equality, free elections, abolition of the death penalty, the end to Sharia law, a non-nuclear Iran, a market economy, which has been embraced, by the way, by some 4,000 bipartisan lawmakers around the globe, including majorities in 34 legislatures.
We recommend you take this moment to do what we're about to do, which is enjoy an Alp.
Your government doesn't care about you. That's why you need a medical emergency kit. It contains life-saving medications like ivermectin, Z-Pak, and antibiotics. Stock them before they block them.
Legislatures. Just recently, some 225 bipartisan members of the House of Representatives, a majority, endorsed HRES 166, which recognizes NCRI's plan for the future of Iran for a democratic secular republic. Naturally, the attitude of the West toward our movement has been by and large affected by a very elaborate and sophisticated campaign of disinformation by the Iranian regime. I think when you add to that the propensity and the willingness on the part of Western governments to do business with Iran, naturally they have adhered to the demands of the regime, which has been to crack down on its main opposition, the existential threat, which of course are the NCRI and the MEK. But I think, quite frankly, things are beginning to change. As Abe Lincoln said once, you can fool all of the people some of the time, some of the people all the time, but you cannot fool all of the people all the time. And so people are beginning to realize that there's no hope in this regime. For a long time, as I'm sure you know, the West invested on somehow moderating the behavior of this regime, whether it was through concessions, whether it was through cracking down on its opposition. But as the old saying goes, a leopard will never change spots. And I think, quite frankly, that the American nuclear negotiators now, after going back and forth, I think in 5 sessions, the 6th one supposedly coming up this Sunday, have recognized that this regime is a master of denial and deception and procrastination, and they're not going to give up the nuclear weapons program. For them, nuclear program is a life insurance policy. It's like a shield, not only to exert their hegemony on regional countries, but also help them survive against their most existential and immediate threat, which is the Iranian people and the Iranian opposition.
Very interesting. Is there anything else you want to get out to the public, Ali?
Well, I think one thing that needs to be said, really, and this is something that you talk about, the legacy media has been ignored, is this recent spate of executions in Iran. Since the so-called moderate president Pezeshkian took office in August, there have been no fewer than 1,339 executions in Iran, which is a staggering number. Just in the month of June, 47 were hanged. Since the beginning of 2025, 367 have been hanged. That comes to about 1 every 4 hours. And that goes to show that for the regime, the most serious threat, the most serious danger are the people of Iran themselves. And they have talked about that. Khamenei, in his New Year address, talked about the nuclear issue, talked about the possibility of more sanctions, whatever. But the issue that he focused on more than anything else was the possibility of a sedition, which, of course, in his means for them, euphemism for the uprisings that have beset this regime since 2017. So I think the legacy media ought to address this issue of executions in Iran. I think rhetoric is good, verbal condemnation is good, but action must be taken, which is why Mrs. Rajavi has called on the international community not only to address the nuclear program, but also Iran's egregious human rights dossier and haul the regime leaders, including Khamenei, before an international tribunal for 40 years of crime against humanity and genocide against the Iranian people.
Ali Safavi, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you coming on short notice after this news was breaking yesterday. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and looking forward to seeing you again soon.
Yes.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much.
Well, in the case of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, these are 2 medications that have been FDA approved for use in humans for decades. They are very, very inexpensive. Interestingly, available over the counter in almost every other country other than the US and Canada. You can just walk into a pharmacy and buy them like we buy Tylenol in much of the world because they're that safe. And we've known for decades that ivermectin has very strong antiviral properties. It has anti-inflammatory properties, and both ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine are what we call zinc ionophores. They help to move zinc from the bloodstream into the cell, which is where it needs to be in order to fight off a virus. So lots of application for these, and we have every reason to believe that those drugs also will likely have some efficacy against H5N1 or a number of other respiratory viruses that we may meet down the road.
If you haven't noticed, gold has reached a new high, all-time highs actually, and keeps going up every day. Why is that? It's because precious metals are a long-time historical store of value. And if you own a portfolio and you have assets in the fiat currencies, i.e. stocks, bonds, cash, or whatever, you're vulnerable to hyperinflation, which is coming as our debt explodes another trillion every 90 days. It's really scary. So how do you protect yourself? Go to Advisor Metals. If you look on any of our cdm.press sites, about halfway down, there's an ad for Advisor Metals. Click on it, fill out the form for your contact info, and Ira Bishotsky will contact you and talk to you. It's an easy conversation. There's no sales pitch. He's completely verified by us. He has a regulatory background we've checked into. We've checked with his bankers. We've checked with his IRA custodians for metals, and we can highly recommend Advisor Metals and IRA. So go to Advisor Metals. If you call them directly, tell them we sent you at CDM, and he'll definitely take care of you. But protect your portfolio because you really need to. It's coming. Thank you. Welcome back to the SCIF. And I just want to bring up, well, let's do the mission brief since we got right into what's going on with Brent Beecham right off the bat. Today is, what is today? Today is June 13th. It's Friday. I'm your host, L Todd Wood. This is your mission brief. Was the U.S. involved in the attacks on Iran? We talked about that with Brent Beecham. To this point, maybe some air refueling and other intelligence support, but nothing else that we know of. We'll stay up on that story. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, tries to be the president of the United States and take over the National Guard after Trump federalized it. The courts, some district judge gave him that ability, and then the appeals courts blocked it. We'll stay on that story. Financial markets globally are weaker this morning as war kicks off in the Middle East. Trump had a bad PR day yesterday, talking about bringing in 500,000 Chinese students, and you saw in the cold open, no mass deportations of farm workers or hotel workers. Well, what about, taxi drivers? What do we need those too? And this is a slippery slope. We're going to stay and put pressure on the White House to do what they promised. And Ukraine dishonors the dead. That's another story we've stayed on with Pete Blaber. So we'll keep you up to date on what's happening there. But let's bring in Thierry Laurent. I think he's ready in the green room right now, and we'll talk about Maidan and how it correlates to what's happening with No Kings protests here across the country tomorrow. And Thierry, thanks for coming on this morning. And I had you first in the first part of the show, and then I moved you because of the Israeli attack. But I think you're spot on with this, what's behind these demonstrations, as this has been played out before in the Color Revolution playbook. But what say you?
Hello, Todd. How are you doing? It's always a great pleasure, in fact, to come on your show and to discuss, in fact, the situation. And actually, I have to say that the news are very rich for the last 2 to 3 weeks, at a point that we are not sleeping a lot.
Yeah.
And I had to deal with a terrible event for the last 24 hours, which is frightening me kind of a lot in regard of the situation in France and the people that we are representing, we patriots that want to protect, in fact, the interest of our nation, which is France and not Europe. I was in contact for several years with Eric Denessé. He used to be in our intel services within the Marine, like Scott Ritter. Actually, this is the equivalence. When he left, he has been building like an intelligence services for economy. And we have been discussing very often the situation in Ukraine, and especially my experience of Maidan and what has been developing after that, and the reason why we have been heading a situation of crisis between Ukraine and Russia. After my trip from Moscow, in which I have been staying about 2 weeks, and I've been learning a lot in regard of the context and meeting with executive there, I was supposed, in fact, to meet with Eric Denessé, in fact, to debrief and to discuss, in fact, the way that the international situation was evolving. I have been hearing yesterday that Eric Denessé has been committing suicide. But I do not believe a second. For one reason, I was supposed to meet with him. Mm-hmm. Which mean, in other terms, that somebody that has the intention, in fact, to collect international economic intelligence is not about, in fact, to commit a suicide. This guy was a brilliant individual. Everybody within our community in France knows him. Mm-hmm. He was like a reference in terms of integrity, in terms of patriotism, in terms of intelligence. This guy was really, really sharp individual. And hearing that he has killed himself was a terrible shock, a really, really terrible shock for us. So basically, we've been hearing also that Macron has been setting up a black cabinet, in fact, to eliminate whoever would not be in the line of his way of thinking. 2 weeks ago, General de Lavarde has been dying of a stroke. Mm-hmm. But everybody knows, any doctors know, that somebody that is willing to have a stroke has some premise at the beginning.
Yeah.
1 second. Voilà. And somebody that is willing to have a stroke will have difficulties to speak. He will have difficulties, in fact, to understand concept. He will have some. He will have some problems of a face problem with the muscle and this and that. And here we know that General de Lavarde was giving speeches on TV, on shows, on different networks every week. Mm-hmm. We've never seen any sign that would have been showing, in fact, that he will be hit by a stroke. Mm-hmm. So basically now our community is just aware that we are becoming target because we are not thinking the way that this guy is thinking. And this guy is extremely dangerous in regard of his behavior and the way that he's conducting the tension over nations, in fact, to bring us to a conflict with Russia. Now that this is said, I would like, in fact, to make a parallel between the situation that United States is facing in Los Angeles and what has been happening on Maidan. And there is a common denominator here. And this denominator is called Open Society of George Soros. Mm-hmm. This guy has been financing the coup of Maidan. And actually, there was a lot of NGOs that has been financed. One was a French one. It was called, there was first a Polish one, Open Dialogue Foundation. And the second one, the French one, was Cosmopolitan Project Foundation. Mm-hmm. And those guys were receiving funds in the way that would be financing, in fact, all the neo-Nazi party to overthrow Yanukovych. What we're seeing here in the US is exactly the same situation. A president has been newly elected. His name is Donald Trump. And George Soros goes against the policy of Donald Trump. He is financing the Black Lives Matters. He is financing the immigration in the US, which is illegal, especially in the volume that has been occurring. 20 million immigrants in few years. This is like the expression of a strong will to reverse completely, in fact, the demographic of a country. And if this guy wants to do so, this is because he wants to take the control out of the society of United States. And this story of open society, this is about, in fact, to dilute the real American people in the way that they will be applying their global agenda. So what we're seeing here is that the Democrats that are running California are taking advantage of this immigration, and instead of calming down the situation, they are pouring oil on it in the way that the situation will be rotting and putting the blame on the President Donald Trump, because the agenda is about to make him failing regarding the way that he wants to conduct his policy. And this is an outrage because this is not respecting the Constitution of the United States. And it seems to me that the Democrats right now, helped by a wing of the Republicans, they are pushing to trigger a civil war within the United States. And this is exactly what those guys have been doing on Maidan. They say, oh, we don't like the government. We are going to finance some extremist group, the way that the Mexican and all the immigrants are financed today. And they have been setting up a coup. And I believe that if they continue like this, this is going to happen in the United States. So basically, the governor of California, who is financed by the same guy, right now is just trying, in fact, to substitute himself in terms of policy to the government of the United States. This is called, in fact, secession. This is sedition. And
well, you know, one of the issues we have is that they're not stopping the financing. I mean, the terror financing is still going on. So DOJ is not going after that, which is a huge, huge, huge issue. So anyway, go ahead.
Well, this is just an outrage. And you remember a few months ago, I was discussing this situation. And I was saying, in fact, to General Valley, I don't understand why Donald Trump is not neutralizing this guy. Mm-hmm. The Open Society organization need to be set as a terrorist organization. They are setting up coup. They have been destabilizing Georgia. They have been destabilizing Abkhazia. They have been destabilizing Ukraine. They tried, in fact, to destabilize Belarus and so on. So basically, what is this guy about? Is he acting like the CIA? Is he acting like a terrorist organization? This has to go at a certain time because there are some rules that are established within society, and we need, in fact, to respect them. He is not of the law. He is not above the law. He needs, in fact, to respond to the law. And actually, what is scaring me is that now that he's becoming extremely old, well, his son is taking, in fact, advantage, and he will run, in fact, the same type of policy. Don't forget who is he and who is he belonging to. He is an LGBT guy, so basically he's in the right line of whatsoever his father has been setting up as a way to handle the population. In fact, those guys, what they are looking after is to trigger chaos everywhere they are setting up their offices.
Yeah.
And so basically, I'm just wondering why we are not stopping them, you know?
Well, we had a comment here. Amy Williams says, why hasn't the FBI arrested Soros? The same reason no one else has been arrested. So that's exactly what you're talking about, that we need to take action against these people. You're seeing them arrest guys throwing rocks, but really not the guys at the top that are bringing the trucks full of rocks to be thrown. You know, so that's in the U.S. we have to do that.
Can you realize that the son of Soros is coming inside of the Elysee as if he was a VIP? Who is this guy in regard of the relationship that the state need to have with another? He is a nobody. And he's just representing transversal organization that should not have anything to do with the way that our state need to be run. And this is an outrage. You know, we arrived to a point that the population right now is exsangue. Our country has been completely ruined on the economical point of view. We have a level of bankruptcies that are absolutely colossal. And I was in Paris 48 hours ago. I was invited in the Russian embassy for their event. And actually, I was kind of happy to hear that Rubio was congratulating the people of Russia, because it seems that, in fact, he has been understanding that diplomacy has to take over, in fact, conflictual way, in fact, to handle the relationship between states. And I have been discussing with a lot of people in the street, taking taxis, going in the hotel, and so on. And what I have been measuring is a level of anger and anxiety that you cannot even believe or imagine, because everybody wants to stop this conflict, and Macron is putting oil on the fire to continue to arm the Ukrainian, and on top of it, to try to silence the people that are reasonable. You know, we have a former director of our GSC, which is in fact the equivalent of the CIA, that is saying exactly the same thing of what the administration of Donald Trump is saying. He said, we need to calm down. We need, in fact, to look at the things on a more reasonable way, because this stuff can drift to something we wouldn't be able, in fact, to control. You remember what has been happening Sundays 2 weeks ago, when, in fact, the Ukrainians, they have been attacking the strategic vector carrying nuclear weapons. This could not have been happening if information wouldn't have been leaking from the CIA. And it seems to me that there is a part of this organization that is in line with whatsoever the administration of Trump is putting together, but there is another part that is going completely against whatsoever has been defined in terms of policy line. And this is very dangerous, because, you know, the START agreement is such that each party, meaning Russia and the United States, are giving the visibility of their strategic weapon, okay? So basically, if one is moving, the other will be moving. If nobody is moving, then we are living in a stable world, and there is no nuclear risk at all.
Yes, yes.
So basically, if this has been happening, it means that somebody has been leaking information. And this is extremely dangerous, because the level of confidence between the two parties can collapse anytime. And what I have been observing and understanding from the discussion I had with the Russian part is that the confidence right now has been melting to a level of zero. So you remember in middle of April, I was in a conference with certain numbers of politicians and journalists in the Cambridge University, and there was a representative of the CIA. And when this person has been finishing a speech, the first question I have been asking her is the following: who are you representing? Because whatsoever you have been saying for the last hour goes completely against the policy that your government has been putting together. So basically, are you representing the World Economic Forum? Are you representing the CIA? Are you representing yourself? I want to understand. Because whatsoever you are doing and saying right now goes totally against your own government. And this is an outrage, because she should have a right of reserve and make sure that whatsoever she is saying is exactly the mirror of what her government has been deciding. So what I am understanding here is that there is a wing of the CIA that will go always against what Donald Trump is going to do. And this is extremely dangerous, because this is going to secession. How are you going to handle this stuff? And actually, this is something that I wanted you to do, is that to take the book I have been writing, Ukraine Warning to the World, and send it, in fact, to Kash Patel in the way that he understands what has been happening there, but also to Tulsi Gabbard in the way that she will be acquiring the right information. Because it seems to me that in the surrounding of the president, the right information is not going through in the way that we would be able, in fact, to solve this conflict. We need to stop. It's becoming a way too dangerous right now. You see? Especially when you see what is happening in the Middle East. Because, you know, the situation for Russia and United States can be extremely tricky. United States has an interest, in fact, to protect Israel. But the way that Israel is conducting its policy regarding Iran start to be extremely dangerous. Iran is not Iraq. Iran is not the Gaza Strip. It is not the Hamas. This is a 90 million people that is extremely well armed. They have a number of missiles that they have been building for the last 20 years. That is very scary. What the guys they want to do? On top of it, Iran is backed up by Russia. But Russia is playing like a sort of moderator, because inside of Israel, they have about 1.2 million Russian people living in Tel Aviv. So basically, they are obliged, in fact, to manage the goat and the cabbage. You see, they try, in fact, to moderate the situation and not, in fact, to poison it. Fortunately, Vladimir Putin is a kind of guy that is thinking coldly and will never react on the moment and on the emotional level. Fortunately, we have this guy in charge, because if it was Medvedev, I don't know what would be the situation today.
Yeah.
You see?
Yes, all very good points. I want to just highlight the book you mentioned while we were talking about it. Sorry, the wrong one. There we go. Ukraine, a warning to the world. You can get this at historyofbooks.com or anywhere books are sold. Please check it out. Lots of good information that you will learn about and what's happening in that part of the world. Thierry, what else? Is there anything else you want to get out? Because I do think that what you're seeing in LA and other parts of the country today, tomorrow, all over the country, is a very color revolution style revolt that is being funded and executed and planned by the same type of people.
Mm-hmm. Well, until now, you know that Vladimir Putin has been promising that he will be responding to the attack of the spider nets that has been put together by the Ukrainian SBU in a very harsh manner. For the moment, he's retaining his hopes. I wish that this will continue and he will not make any mistakes that would be rotting the situation to the point that the European, for whatsoever reason, will be interfering. Because I don't know where this will go. Now, I'm not very much worrying regarding what is happening in Ukraine, because this conflict is going to end by itself due to the fact that the motivation on the Ukrainian side is completely collapsing, and Zelensky start to realize that the only move that he has to do is to run away from the country in the way that we can solve the situation. Nevertheless, the big interrogation is going to be what Iran is going to do, because they cannot not react. If they are not reacting, in fact, the regime that is in place will be kicked out, period. They will not have any credibility. But on the other side, if they react, they will make it very harsh. How the United States are going to react in regard of the fact that the Iranian regime is backed up by Russia. And you know, China is not very much happy about the situation, because don't forget, they are investing a lot on the Belt and Road Initiative on the South Corridor. And what they want to do is business. If this region is completely destabilized, in fact, all the supply chain in the world are going to collapse. And at the end of the story, we're all going to pay the price. This region is extremely sensitive. And on top of it, because this is the region that is producing the biggest amount of oil. So basically, as all our economy right now in Europe and in the United States are extremely fragile due to the level of debt that has been contracted, what is going to happen if the barrel is going to $100 to $120? You know, we are going to face a major collapse. This story has to stop, you know. And what is going to happen in the next 48 hours is really, really scary. really scary.
I completely agree. Thierry, thanks for your time. We'll have you back next week as things progress in Ukraine and around the world, because I think you've got your finger on all these points that are very important. So thank you very much.
Actually, I am heading to Moscow because I will have to comment the speeches that Vladimir Putin is going to give in St. Petersburg summit, and I will be live on Russia Today France.
Keep us in the flow of information. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Todd. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
This is a special report.
Knowing how to invest your money is harder than ever before. Dealing with stock market volatility, record debt, and terrorist attacks requires new thinking. At U.S. Asset Management, we can help you see the world more clearly so that you can move beyond the chaos and invest with confidence. Call us, visit us online, or drop by our office. U.S. Asset Management, helping you make better decisions with your money.
Pandemic, we can never be caught unprepared again. And so many Americans, when COVID hit, they had nothing in the house. The stores were shut down and doctors' offices were shut down. And even if doctors prescribed drugs, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, pharmacists wouldn't fill the prescriptions. That was a nightmare.
Now the situation is much worse. We have these horrible supply chain problems. In our emergency medical kit at the Wellness Company, we have 8 prescription drugs that are all potentially life-saving.
Most people who died with COVID, they died in the hospital because they didn't receive early treatment.
Every American family should have one of these.
I can tell you the Wellness Company kit is the answer.
So we are in the factory in Kentucky. This is Alp World HQ, and we are at the end of the packing line. So I'm going to show you how it works. We have the card, throw it in there. There's a packing slip, and then you have the Alp. And 4, but that seems honestly like a lot. 3 now, but it's good. These pack a punch that, you know, for a normal nicotine brand, it'd be like 8. You know, we think 3 is fine. Next one. Again, 4. I'll throw 3 in just to keep it fair. Okay? There you go. So you can see you can get fast at this. And really, it's just a matter of repetition. This is kind of the assembly line that, you know, Henry Ford devised so long ago.
Tucker stealing all the applicants.
Welcome back to the SCIF. I want to walk through some of the stories on CDM.press that we've had so many guests on today that a little hard to get all the information out, but there's a great article, and we've been doing some great reporting on CDM about what's happening inside Iran with the Israeli strikes. There's multiple articles. You can go through and peruse them all. We're updating them regularly. We were updating them all night, and we've got the best information out there, which we're an intelligence show and we're the best out there. So check that out. Very good coverage. Also, a part of this whole thing are financial markets. We have an article up about what's happening. Financial markets are weaker. There's a little bit of buying in the 10-year Treasury market, which means that people are looking at the U.S. as a safe haven still, which is interesting. Let me just bring up CNBC, and you can see the markets right now. Still weakness across the board in equities. Crypto weak across the board. Gold is higher, of course, because safe havens again. Oil is higher significantly. That's a problem for gas prices, for the economy. I'm sure the White House is watching this. And then the 10-year bond is, well, it's back up a little bit, so maybe there's some selling. but the financial markets are weaker. We're going to have Tom Teague on Monday morning to go into everything that's happening in the financial markets because it's very important, in our opinion, and one of the things that we cover here on CDM. I want to bring up Gavin Newsom and his drama out in California. He had some wins in his lawsuit in a district court, of course, who's trying to tell the President of the United States how to run the country as far as federalizing the National Guard, which the president in an emergency definitely has that power. Newsom took him to court because he doesn't like the National Guard being taken away from him. And he was squawking about that and salivating about it and mocking the president. But that didn't last too long because a appeals court gave the power back to the president where it belongs. And this may go to the Supreme Court, but I can't believe that the Supreme Court even would want to make that precedent that that governors have control over the president of the United States. That's just simply not constitutional. And you have the president of Mexico saying, well, we're going to mobilize our population inside the United States. I mean, that is an act of war in itself. And then you have Mexicans waving the Mexican flag and destroying property, stopping traffic, harming citizens, hurting people, throwing rocks at police. So there's definitely an insurrection, and the president has every authority to federalize the National Guard, just like he did, just like President Kennedy did with Wallace in Alabama when he sent the Guard down there to desegregate the schools. I mean, that's another very good example of the power that the president has. So Newsom can take a hike. He wants to be president, and they're running all kind of fake polls saying he's gaining in popularity. You can see that narrative out there, but it's just simply not true. So again, we'll see what goes on there. We're going to stay on it at armedforces.press and the Guard. Really sad story that we've been all over in the last week, where there was an agreement between Russia and Ukraine to exchange prisoners, which they did, and injured, which they did. But there was also an agreement to exchange bodies. And Russia had prepared 6,000 bodies in Russian proper, in Kursk primarily, which all the left was saying, oh, Kursk wasn't a big deal. Well, Russia was easily able to gather 6,000 bodies and of Ukrainians and mercenaries, and they had them in refrigerated trucks on the border and were ready to bring them in. But Ukraine said, no, we don't want them. And why did they say that? Because then they would have to mark them as killed in action, these Ukrainian soldiers, and pay the families. They didn't want to pay the families. So what did Ukraine do? They blackmailed the families and said, if you accept that you are not going to get any compensation, you can have the body of your son or husband or father back. And 1,200 approximately of the 6,000 accepted that and got the bodies back without any life insurance money. We have SGLI in the U.S., Servicemen's Group Life Insurance. I think I don't even know the totals anymore. It used to be 120, 150,000 when I was in, but it's much more now. That has to be paid if a soldier dies in war, in a conflict, to the families. It's a similar situation in Ukraine. Well, they didn't want to pay that. And our sources in Ukraine are saying, well, they've stolen all the money. That's why they didn't want to pay that. They don't have it. So just really sad, dishonorable situation. And how can the U.S. government work with a nation, a government, a regime that does that to its own citizens, cares nothing about their own families in the country and just about the money? I found this extremely dishonorable, even as a soldier or a military person on either side of the aisle. You don't want to see the families of the dead be treated this way. They've already given enough, and then to insult and just abuse the families this way is just out of control. There was another article which is extremely important I'm going to bring up now. Keith Kellogg, the envoy to Zelensky by President Trump. Initially, he was to Ukraine and Russia, but he now is only Russia because Russia said he's too anti-Russia, pro-Ukrainian. He's totally into the whole matrix narrative, rah, rah, Ukraine, no matter what, kill the Russians, keep the war going to the last Ukrainian. He compared Zelensky to Abraham Lincoln. I wrote a scathing article on armedforces.press. This really angered me. Lincoln's one of the most revered presidents in the United States. My family fought on both sides of the war. And I know that Lincoln cared about the people, cared about the soldiers, and honored the soldiers in the Gettysburg Address and honored the future of the country. Zelensky is none of that. In addition, Zelensky is destroying Christianity in Ukraine. There's an article or an interview on this article you can go and see from Amsterdam, the attorney for the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, a Jewish attorney in London, who's fighting for the church to not be destroyed. You can watch that interview on this article on AFP and understand what Zelensky is doing to Christianity in Ukraine, which is a big focus of ours. And we talk about repression and suppression and persecution of Christians worldwide. Well, it's happening big time in Ukraine by this government. And, you know, I know Lincoln wasn't there's varying degrees of thought as to how Christian he was. He definitely referred to the Almighty later during the Civil War. And so to compare him with Zelensky is just absurd, dishonorable, disgusting. And I just really had an offense against that. So I wrote this article on armedforces.press. I'm going to run a tape. We're big into history. We're going to run a tape after this break on the region of West Ukraine, which most people don't know a lot about. And it's front and center in this conflict because I think there's a lot of old hatreds and wars being fought by different people for different agendas in that region in Ukraine with the Russians. And there's a lot of old hatreds there, you know, the Yugoslavs and all that. There's a term for the Balkans because there's all these ethnic groups in Europe. There's a reason it's called Balkanization because there's a lot of different ethnic groups in one spot. It's very similar in West Ukraine, and that could be considered part of the Balkans, Romania, and that whole group and area, Moldova, Hungary, Poland, all that area has had thousands of years of ethnic fights, and there's a lot of that still percolating under the current situation in the current war, and I want to educate you on that. I found an interesting video that we're going to play here in a second after this break. Stay with us. Put CDM.press in your daily scan. We are the global newswire without the globalist spin. This is the best intelligence show out there. There's nothing like what we're doing. And we have reporters all over the world where information literally, as we were talking with Brent Beecham, flows in all night long. And we're up all night collating that and correlating it and putting it in a presentation where you get the best stories. There's so much happening. You get the best information you need to be the smartest in the room, not necessarily all the information, but the best. So we'll be right back after this break. Stay with us. The bird flu is circulating. We're getting more and more press, more fear mongering, more warnings about this. First, let's start with that. What say you on?
Well, what I say is it specifically is not circulating. It's in animals. There's one human, maybe two transmissions, no human-to-human transmission. And stand by, everybody. If there is some sort of sudden human-to-human transmission, you should immediately be suspicious that gain of function was involved with that. Just the fact that they're taking an animal virus and going nuts on it in the press and talking about it all the time, that to me leads me to believe that they have concerns that somebody is doing something with that virus, because this would not happen naturally, in my opinion.
Our world is changing rapidly. Many crucial systems we depend upon are collapsing. And the most important system that is failing is the food supply.
Mr. President, this Council is more than aware of the multiple challenges and threats the world is facing today. But the threat of famine, people starving slowly to death, must be a red line.
You know, these food prices are going to keep going up, and they're going to keep feeding excuse after excuse, narrative after narrative. Yeah, where you're going to have to get off that treadmill and start getting more autonomous with your own food growing.
You want to make sure that you can eat, because frankly, food is the biggest issue as we are going through these transitions.
But amidst the chaos, there is a path to resilience. Marjorie Wildcraft is the female leader of the survival and preparedness movement. Marjorie has taught millions of people how to grow an abundance of food in a grid-down situation, even if you have no experience, are older, or out of shape.
I've spent decades finding the fastest, easiest, and funnest ways for the average person to be able to grow a lot of food. I've created a step-by-step process that's so simple that even kids to elders have been using it in order to grow a lot of their own food. And you can too, even if you have no experience, you're older, or you're out of shape.
Growing your own food is like printing your own money. Get started today.
Welcome back to the SCIF. We played in the cold open a video of President Trump saying he's going to make an exception for agricultural workers and hotel workers in California or around the country for deportation if they're illegal and have been here a long time and have not committed any crimes. That's not what we voted for. I can see finding some kind of work program and giving them some kind of visa, but not putting them through the legal process in some fashion is not okay. It's not what MAGA voted for. And that, in addition to allowing 500,000 Chinese students to come in a year, which President Trump was talking about, is also extremely concerning. And there was a lot of talk about that. I wrote a brief story about this on CDM, or we had somebody do it. Is Trump betraying MAGA on deportations to suit big ag and big hospitality? You can find that there. The video is there. In fact, I'll just run that real quick, and so you can see the video that I'm talking about.
What made you change your mind about targeting in California farmers and people in the hotel and leisure business?
Well, we're not targeting. In fact, if you look today, I put out a statement today about farmers. Our farmers are being hurt badly by, they have very good workers. They've worked for them for 20 years. They're not citizens, but they've turned out to be, great. And we're going to have to do something about that. We can't take farmers and take all their people and send them back because they don't have maybe what they're supposed to have, maybe not. And you know what's going to happen and what is happening? They get rid of some of the people because, you go into a farm and you look and people they've been there for 20, 25 years and they've worked great and the owner of the farm loves them and everything else. And then you're supposed to throw them out. And you know what happens? They end up hiring the people, the criminals that have come in, the murderers from prisons and everything else. So we're going to have an order on that pretty soon, I think. We can't do that to our farmers and leisure too, hotels. We're going to have to use a lot of common sense on that.
So there you go. We'll see what happens. We're going to stay on that story because, again, that's not what we voted for. And I have no problem with a legal workers program, but where they come and go back, and they definitely don't get path to citizenship, which is also what the long-term goal is. And the Reagan Amnesty Act was supposed to have enforcement. It never did. And that started all of our problems. So we're going to keep the pressure on. We're about truth here. We're pro-Trump. We're pro-agenda, Trump agenda, but we're also pro doing what you told us you're going to do. So we will stay on that. I'm going to run this. It's about 10 minutes long, this video on Western Ukraine, which I found extremely, extremely interesting. And it's history you need to know about the banderas in Western Ukraine. And I'll just play this and we'll go from here.
The 22nd of June, 1941. The German army lunges across the Soviet frontier. Panzer tanks grind over dismantled border posts, while dive bombers scream down on Brest, Minsk, and Lviv. Villages burn in their wake, and behind the armored spearheads march members of the Einsatzgruppen, which are Nazi mobile death squads. Together with local nationalists, they herd Jews and political commissars to their freshly dug graves. Columns of Soviet prisoners stumble west under rifle butts, and the German advance seems unstoppable. Long columns of refugees clog the tracks east as the German armed forces, the Wehrmacht, race toward Leningrad and Moscow. Among the forces clearing roads, seizing rail depots, and identifying hostile elements, which also include women and children from the minorities, are local nationalist formations who greet the Nazis not as invaders, but as liberators from Stalin's terror. The most infamous Nazi collaborator in the early days of the invasion into the Soviet Union is Stepan Bandera. Stepan Bandera was born on the 1st of January 1909 in the Ukrainian village of Stary Ugrinev, then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. His father Andrei was a Greek Catholic priest, and his mother Miroslava was the daughter of a priest and a stay-at-home mum. When Stepan was 5, the First World War reached the valley where they lived. Trenches zigzagged through the orchards, soldiers demanded grain, and schoolrooms closed, so the young Stepan learned from his parents. The 1918 armistice ended First World War, but also meant the end for the Austro-Hungarian Empire. However, the end of war did not bring peace to Galicia region. In Eastern Europe, many ethnicities were fighting for their freedom and were trying to establish their own state. The Ukrainians were no exception, as they founded the Ukrainian People's Republic. However, the Poles, whose ancient state was restored after the end of the First World War, were also interested in the same territory. Polish troops fought Ukrainian volunteers for control of Lviv, the region's capital, and by 1919, the victorious new Polish Republic absorbed eastern Galicia. Overnight, the Bandera family became Polish subjects. Polish policemen arrived. The Ukrainian language was suppressed, and a white and red flag replaced the blue and yellow colors of a short-lived independent Ukraine, which Stepan had begun to love. At 15, he joined Plast, a Ukrainian scouting movement that blended camping trips with clandestine lectures on history and self-discipline. Soon afterward, he swore the secret oath of the Ukrainian military organization, an underground league of people who believed petitions would never free their homeland and that only action supported with weapons could redraw borders and help to create an independent Ukraine. In 1927, Stepan Bandera graduated from high school in the town of Stry and entered the agronomy faculty of the Lviv Polytechnic University. Lecture halls could not hold him. After dark, he slipped out to attic rooms where older conspirators taught him how to forge documents, mix invisible ink, and memorize passwords. At first, he distributed leaflets urging students to boycott official ceremonies organized by Polish authorities. Soon, however, he was participating in far more sinister activities, and he never finished his studies because of his involvement in the nationalist movement. February 1929 saw the birth of a larger, more disciplined network, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, or the OUN. At only 20, Bandera entered as a foot soldier yet rose through the ranks with startling speed. He was dealing with the propaganda of the movement and also traveled by night train under false names, spoke in cramped village halls, and built courier lines that carried letters from the Carpathians to the Baltic coast. His followers not only painted Polish government buildings with tar and sabotaged telephone poles, but also attacked local politicians. When 2 militants murdered the Polish deputy Tadeusz Hołówko in 1931, Bandera allegedly ordered church bells to be rung across Lviv to cast the killers as martyrs, as they were sentenced to death as murderers and terrorists. Violence in the interwar Poland intensified. Ukrainian nationalists robbed post office safes to fund weapons and money, detonated bombs at official exhibitions, and staged boycotts against state shops. The climax came on the 15th of June 1934, when an OUN gunman shot Poland's Interior Minister Bronisław Pieracki. Bandera was arrested in Lviv and tried regarding his involvement in the plot to assassinate Pieracki, and also for being an OUN leader. He was convicted of terrorism and sentenced to death, but the death sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment. When Nazi Germany invaded Poland on the 1st of September 1939 from the west and the Soviet Union attacked on the 17th of September from the east, Poland collapsed in a matter of weeks. According to one story, Bandera escaped from prison after it was abandoned by the guards. According to the other, he was released from prison. One way or the other, Bandera moved first to Lviv, but after realizing it would be occupied by the Soviets, he moved to Kraków, the capital of Germany's occupational general government, where officers of the Abwehr, the German military intelligence, saw potential in any group prepared to fight the Soviet Union in the foreseeable future. Bandera, using the code name Konsul II, cooperated with the Abwehr. His goal was to run diversion activities against the Soviet Union after Germany's attack. In 1940, the OUN split. Another leader of the OUN, Andrei Melnik, led a cautious wing that sought German goodwill through diplomacy. Younger militants rallied to Bandera, forming what became the OUNB, named after him. Both factions preached radical nationalism and shared anti-Semitic slogans, but Bandera demanded swift revolution. During his cooperation with Nazi Germany, he drafted plans for mobile groups of 5 to 15 volunteers who would follow German troops, raise Ukrainian flags, and seize local administrations the moment Soviet rule collapsed. To finance the effort, he accepted Nazi money and charmed German officials with promises of sabotage behind Red Army lines. During his time in Krakow, Bandera got married with Yaroslava Oparivska. She was also a member of the OUN, and they had 3 children. Between his release from a Polish jail in 1939 and Germany's attack on the Soviet Union in June 1941, Bandera's faction of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, the OUNB, cooperated closely with German military intelligence. Before start of the war, in August 1939, the Abwehr created a 120-man sabotage unit codenamed Bergbauernhilfe. They were recruited from Bandera's followers and trained for operations against Poland. The goal of this unit was to erode Polish defenses by conducting a terror campaign directed at Polish farmers and Jews. After Bandera resettled in German-occupied Krakow, his relationship with the Nazis deepened. In spring 1941, Bandera held meetings with the heads of Germany's intelligence regarding the formation of the Nachtigall and Roland battalions. During this time, the OUN received 2.5 million Reichsmarks for subversive activities inside the Soviet Union. Stepan Bandera assured the Germans that these units, together with small mobile groups already infiltrating Soviet territory, would secure German lines of advance as soon as the frontier was crossed. This arrangement positioned his movement as an auxiliary partner in Hitler's Eastern Campaign even before the start of Operation Barbarossa, which was the code name for the German invasion of the Soviet Union. On the 22nd of June 1941, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa. As panzer tanks rolled east, Bandera's mobile groups crossed the front line. On the 30th of June, in freshly captured Lviv, members of Bandera movement proclaimed a sovereign Ukrainian state. OUNB militias wearing matching armbands began arresting Jews and suspected Soviet collaborators. These activities ended in violent pogroms. There is no evidence that Bandera, still in Krakow, actively supported or participated in the Lviv pogroms or acts of violence against Jewish and Polish civilians. But he was well informed about the violence and was unable or unwilling to instruct Ukrainian nationalist military units to protect minorities. His activities regarding Ukrainian independence were short-lived. German authorities requested the Declaration of Independence to be withdrawn, but Bandera refused. A few days later, Bandera was arrested, held in Berlin, and later sent to the special prisoners block of Sachsenhausen concentration camp. It was a specific type of prison, used for high-profile political prisoners and high-risk escapees. During his imprisonment in the camp, it was possible for Bandera's wife Yaroslava to visit and to keep him in touch with his followers. His relationship with the Germans was not ideal. For example, 2 of his brothers, Alexander and Vasily, were sent to Auschwitz, where they were murdered. In the meantime, units loyal to the OUNB and Bandera had formed the Ukrainian Insurgent Army UPA in the forests of Volyn and were fighting both Nazis and Soviets, while also massacring Polish and Jewish villagers in a brutal campaign of ethnic cleansing. Bandera, thanks to a visit from his wife, managed to get into contact with other OUNB leaders, and some believe that he was one of the orchestrators of the terror which took place in Volyn and eastern Galicia. Between 1941 and 1944, the militant wing of the OUNB translated its slogan, "Ukraine for Ukrainians," into systematic bloodshed. OUN-trained militias helped launch the Lviv pogroms of June and July 1941, in which several thousand Jews were beaten and shot. 2 years later, the Ukrainian insurgent army, formed and led mostly by OUNB members, turned on the region's Polish and Jewish minority, coordinating nighttime attacks on farms and church villages across Volyn and eastern Galicia. The attacks often took place in such a way that a UPA unit entered the village pretending to be Soviet partisans. The men split up, entered houses, and demanded food from the residents. Meanwhile, the village was surrounded, and all Poles passing through were also detained. In the village of Paroshla, UPA partisans ordered all the inhabitants to lay down and tied them up, under the pretext that they were about to carry out an assault on a nearby German rail transport. And if the village inhabitants were found to be tied up, that would serve as proof for the Germans that the Poles did not cooperate with the UPA in the attack. Not all the inhabitants of Paroshla believed them, since some of them could speak Ukrainian. But being unarmed, they had no choice but to do as they were told. Almost all the Poles in the village were murdered with knives and axes. Old men, women, and children, including a 6-month-old baby who was stuck to a table with knife. Only 12 Poles survived, including a 12-year-old boy named Witold Kołodziński, who suffered a cracked skull from an axe blow. This was also part of Bandera's struggle for Ukrainian independence. In these attacks against the civilian population, it is estimated that 60 to 120,000 civilians were murdered. As the Red Army pushed west in 1944, the Nazis sought the help of any force that might slow the Soviet advance. In September 1944, Bandera walked out of Sachsenhausen concentration camp after promising to direct anti-communist operations. He met other released OUN leaders and drafted plans to fight the Soviet Union. One example was an idea to parachute Ukrainian units to the rear of the advancing Soviet forces and create chaos. Yet collapsing front lines made most schemes irrelevant. After the war, Bandera and his family moved several times around Germany, at that time occupied by Western allies. Soviet and Polish politicians and diplomats demanded his extradition, calling him a terrorist who was responsible for thousands of deaths. American counterintelligence officers disagreed. They considered him extremely dangerous, but also too valuable to hand over to the Soviets, since he knew the Ukrainian underground movement and was a skilled anti-communist fighter. Under a shadow arrangement called Operation Anyface, Washington quietly blocked Polish and Soviet requests. As a result of these activities, Bandera moved a lot in post-war Germany, and at the end he settled in Munich, once a stronghold of the Nazis. Bandera was also working for Ukrainian independence after the end of the Second World War, and the Kremlin wanted his voice silenced. They tried, over the years, to find and kidnap him into the Soviet Union. When Soviet patience finally ran out, the infamous KGB, the intelligence agency of the Soviet Union, sent the young Ukrainian Bohdan Stashinsky to execute Bandera. The KGB trained Stashinsky to use a spray gun that fired a jet of poison gas from a crushed cyanide capsule. The gas was designed to induce cardiac arrest, making the victim's death look like a heart attack. Stashinsky had used the weapon to kill another Ukrainian politician, Lev Rebet, in 1957. On the 15th of October 1959, he used an improved version of the same gas gun to assassinate Stepan Bandera in Munich. This time, the KGB was successful, and the 50-year-old Bandera was killed on the spot. On the 20th of October 1959, Bandera was buried in Munich, and 2 years later his wife and 3 children moved to Toronto in Canada. Bandera is still remembered by many as a Ukrainian national hero. He is mainly seen by this group of people for his struggle for Ukrainian independence, whether in the struggle against Poland or the Soviet Union. This struggle, however, was tied to the suffering of thousands of innocent people and meant an alliance with the monstrous regime of Nazi Germany.
I wanted to bring you that history because that's what we're seeing in Ukraine and Russia conflict right now. It's the same conflict. You know, Putin has talked about the Nazis denazification process in Russia. And they talked in that clip about Chrystia Freeland, or about the Banderites moving to Canada. Well, guess who is the woman who celebrated a Nazi collaborator or Nazi death camp guard in the Canadian Parliament, and also her great-grandfather was a card-carrying Nazi from Galicia. It's Chrystia Freeland, which is not her real name. You can find that's a fake name, meaning free the land, ethnic genocide, ethnic cleansing, get the people off the land we don't like. So this is still going on. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. We've been talking about this a lot over the years, but it's very important story, and we love history, and you're much smarter if you know history. Thanks. We'll be back Monday. Check out the Georgia show at 2 p.m. on Sunday Eastern. We'll be back on the SCIF Monday through Friday, 10 to noon Eastern. See you Monday. Thank you very much. And stay tuned to cdm.press for news on the conflict over the weekend. Take care.